Right now, someone in your life is quietly studying you. They're paying attention to the things that make you smile, the moments that make you withdraw, the way your voice changes when you're hurt, and the kind of reassurance that seems to calm you. But they aren't observing you out of simple curiosity. They're watching because they genuinely don't know how to love you in the way your heart actually needs. They can feel the distance growing between what they offer and what you long for, yet they struggle to bridge that gap. Instead of asking directly, they analyze, hesitate, second-guess themselves, and hope they'll somehow figure it out without exposing how uncertain they feel. This isn't always because they don't care. Sometimes it's because the language of healthy love was never taught to them. They may have learned that affection is risky, vulnerability is dangerous, or that getting too close means eventually getting hurt. So even while they care deeply, they remain trapped behind invisible walls, built long before they ever met you. They notice your needs, but responding to them feels unfamiliar, even frightening. Their silence is often filled with thoughts they never speak aloud. And the unsettling part is that, deep down, you already know exactly who that person is. Maybe you've sensed the hesitation in their eyes, the inconsistency in their actions, or the way they seem close one moment and emotionally miles away the next. You've felt that quiet contradiction of someone who seems deeply affected by your presence while still keeping parts of themselves locked away. Your intuition has been whispering the truth long before your mind was ready to accept it. If you're a super empath, you feel absolutely everything. You sense a shift in someone's mood before they've even stepped into the room. You catch the tension buried inside a simple text message. You carry the weight of things left unsaid like a physical pressure on your chest. And because you feel this much, you end up making a mistake that nearly every super empath makes without ever noticing it happening. You reveal too much. You expose too much of your inner world to someone whose entire nervous system is built to run from exactly that kind of depth. Today, I want to walk you through the 5 things a super empath needs to keep hidden from an avoidant partner. Not because you're manipulating anyone, and not because you're playing games, but because your emotional survival inside this connection depends on understanding this. And I promise, by the time we reach the 3rd point, something is going to click into place for you that you've probably never heard framed this way before. Now picture someone you love, someone who goes cold out of nowhere, someone who withdraws the second things start to feel close, real, or intimate. You've probably replayed your conversations with this person 100 times over, trying to pinpoint exactly what you did wrong. You've probably adjusted your words, your tone, your timing, convinced that if you could just find the perfect formula, they'd finally open up, finally stay, finally choose you without bolting. But here's what nobody ever explained to you. The issue was never how much you loved them. The issue was how visible you made yourself. Not visible to them, visible to yourself. You allowed them to witness the entire architecture of how deeply you feel things, and for someone wired the way an avoidant person is wired, that kind of exposure doesn't register as warmth. It registers as a threat. Avoidant attachment is often mistaken for emotional coldness, but many avoidant individuals actually feel emotions very deeply, because early experiences taught them that closeness, vulnerability, or depending on others led to pain or rejection. They developed emotional distance as a protective survival strategy. Their withdrawal usually reflects self-protection rather than a lack of love or caring. Children cannot simply stop needing love. Instead, they learn to stop showing that they need it. They begin convincing themselves that independence is safer than closeness. Every disappointment becomes another brick in an invisible emotional wall. Every unmet need strengthens the belief that relying on others only leads to hurt. Eventually, those protective responses become automatic. They are no longer choices. They become personality patterns that follow the individual into adulthood. This is why emotional distance feels safe to avoidant individuals. It isn't because they enjoy loneliness. It's because distance once protected them from disappointment. Their nervous system learned an equation that operates almost automatically. Closeness increases vulnerability, vulnerability increases danger, therefore distance creates safety. By adulthood, this equation runs quietly in the background without requiring conscious thought. They may genuinely desire intimacy while simultaneously feeling an overwhelming urge to escape it whenever it begins to feel real. That contradiction confuses both the avoidant person and everyone around them. They may pursue relationships with excitement in the beginning. During the early stages, emotional risk feels relatively manageable because commitment hasn't fully activated their attachment system. Everything feels possible. They can be affectionate, attentive, funny, thoughtful, and deeply engaged. They imagine a future filled with connection because the relationship still feels spacious and voluntary. But as emotional intimacy deepens, something inside begins shifting. The relationship starts requiring greater vulnerability. Expectations naturally increase. Conversations become more emotionally revealing. Dependence slowly grows on both sides. For someone with avoidant attachment, this increasing closeness doesn't simply register as love. Their nervous system quietly interprets it as rising emotional risk. This shift often happens beneath conscious awareness. They don't wake up one morning deciding to become distant. Instead, they begin feeling restless without understanding why. Small interactions suddenly feel emotionally exhausting. Innocent questions can feel strangely intrusive. Loving gestures may create pressure instead of comfort. Time alone becomes increasingly necessary to regulate emotions that they struggle to explain even to themselves. This is one of the most painful misunderstandings in relationships involving avoidant attachment. Both people are responding to fear, but each misunderstands the other's fear completely. The anxious partner fears abandonment and reaches for more reassurance. The avoidant partner fears engulfment and reaches for more distance. Ironically, each person's coping strategy intensifies the other's deepest insecurity. One pursues because they fear losing connection. The other withdraws because they fear losing themselves. Inside the avoidant person's mind, however, the experience is rarely simple. They often miss their partner while simultaneously needing space from them. They may think about the relationship constantly while appearing emotionally detached. They may love deeply while feeling physically incapable of expressing that love consistently. This internal conflict creates enormous confusion because their heart and nervous system seem to want opposite things. Their emotional suppression is often misunderstood as emotional absence. These are not the same. Suppression means the feelings remain present, but are pushed beneath conscious awareness because expressing them once felt unsafe. Many avoidant individuals become so skilled at suppressing emotions that they genuinely believe they aren't feeling much at all. Then something unexpected happens. A breakup, prolonged distance, or permanent loss suddenly removes the need for emotional protection, allowing years of hidden feelings to rise all at once. This delayed emotional processing explains why some avoidant individuals appear surprisingly unaffected immediately after a breakup, but become overwhelmed months later. During the relationship, their nervous system remained focused on regulating closeness. After the relationship ends, the threat of engulfment disappears, allowing grief that had been carefully contained to emerge. Their sadness isn't new, it was simply postponed. People often ask whether avoidant individuals regret losing meaningful relationships. The answer is more complicated than many expect. Some absolutely do, not because they suddenly realize the other person was perfect, but because distance eventually provides clarity that emotional closeness once prevented. Without the immediate pressure of intimacy, they begin remembering the safety, kindness, laughter, acceptance, and love that once surrounded them. Unfortunately, by the time these realizations become emotionally accessible, the relationship may already be gone. Another common misconception is that avoidant people enjoy hurting others. In reality, many carry enormous guilt after withdrawing from someone they genuinely cared about. They recognize the confusion they've created. They know their inconsistency caused pain, yet they often don't fully understand why they acted the way they did. Without awareness of their attachment patterns, they may simply conclude that something is fundamentally wrong with them, or that they're incapable of maintaining healthy love. This self-criticism quietly fuels the cycle. Believing they're destined to disappoint others, they become even more cautious about emotional closeness. The walls grow higher. Independence becomes more rigid. Relationships begin ending before genuine vulnerability has a chance to flourish. every failed relationship seems to confirm the false belief that lasting intimacy simply isn't meant for them. Yet despite these defenses, the longing for connection never fully disappears. Human attachment is remarkably resilient. Even those who fear intimacy still crave understanding, acceptance, emotional safety, and companionship. They simply don't always know how to receive those experiences without their protective system interpreting them as dangerous. This creates one of the quietest forms of loneliness imaginable, wanting closeness while instinctively pushing it away whenever it arrives. Many avoidant individuals secretly admire people who remain emotionally grounded. They notice those who express needs without panic, set boundaries without hostility, and offer affection without creating pressure. Healthy emotional regulation feels unfamiliar but deeply attractive because it represents something their nervous system rarely experienced growing up. These relationships can gradually teach their brain that intimacy does not always lead to overwhelm. Healing rarely happens through being chased. Constant reassurance, repeated persuasion, or sacrificing one's own needs to accommodate avoidance usually reinforces the underlying cycle. Genuine healing begins when emotional safety becomes consistent rather than conditional. It develops through relationships where both people can communicate honestly, respect boundaries, tolerate vulnerability, and remain connected even during discomfort. For the avoidant individual, healing often means learning that needing someone does not automatically mean losing independence. It means discovering that vulnerability is not weakness, but courage. It means recognizing that emotions are not enemies to suppress, but signals to understand. It involves gradually replacing survival strategies that were once essential with healthier patterns that fit adult relationships rather than childhood environments. This process is neither quick nor linear. Years of nervous system conditioning cannot disappear through insight alone. Progress usually arrives in small moments, staying present during difficult conversations instead of shutting down, expressing fear instead of disappearing, asking for space without rejecting the relationship, allowing comfort instead of automatically refusing it. Each small experience teaches the nervous system a new possibility. Little by little, the old equation begins changing. Instead of closeness equals danger, the mind slowly learns that closeness can also mean acceptance. Instead of vulnerability equals rejection, it begins discovering that vulnerability often deepens trust. Instead of believing independence requires emotional isolation, the avoidant individual starts realizing that true independence includes the freedom to both stand alone and lean on others when needed. Perhaps the greatest truth about avoidant attachment is this: behind many emotional walls lives someone who never stopped wanting love. They simply learned at a very young age that love often arrived carrying pain. Their distance is not always a reflection of how little they feel. Quite often, it is evidence of how much they once had to protect themselves from feelings that seemed far too powerful to survive. And when those protective walls are met with patience, self-awareness, accountability, and genuine emotional safety, something remarkable can happen. The walls do not collapse overnight, but they begin to develop windows. Light starts reaching places that have remained hidden for years. Fear slowly makes room for trust. Distance gradually gives way to connection. And the person who once believed emotional closeness was the greatest threat to their survival may finally discover that in the right relationship and with the right inner work, it can become the very place where they feel safest of all. So when you show up as a super empath, radiating warmth, attunement, emotional depth, and availability, you don't land as a gift to them. You land as a system overload. Their body slips into a kind of silent panic, not because you're too much, but because they've spent their entire existence guarding against precisely what you're offering them. So what do you actually do with that information? You learn to calibrate. You learn what to hold close, what to protect, and what to keep to yourself. And that's exactly where these 5 things come into play. The first thing a super empath always needs to keep hidden from an avoidant is the full extent of your emotional perception. You genuinely see them. You notice the way their energy goes quiet right before they shut down completely. You catch the tiny flicker across their face the moment someone brings up commitment. You notice when their voice flattens out because they're protecting themselves. You pick up on every bit of it, and your instinct, because you're wired for connection and healing, is to name it out loud, to say, I see what's happening right now, to reflect it back to them so they feel understood. Stop doing that. Here's the reason why. When an avoidant person realizes someone can read them this clearly, it doesn't land as being seen in some beautiful, validating way. It lands as exposure. It feels like being stripped bare in a way that genuinely frightens them. Their entire defense mechanism relies on maintaining some illusion of control over what other people perceive about them. The moment they sense you can read them like an open book, their internal alarm doesn't say, finally, someone gets me. It says, this person is dangerous. This person has too much access to me. Even when you point out their emotional state from a place of love, from the purest intentions imaginable, it registers to them as a violation, an intrusion, and they will punish you for it. Not deliberately, not consciously, but through withdrawal, through turning colder, through manufacturing reasons to put distance between you. So, what should you do instead? Observe quietly. Hold what you know inside yourself. Let yourself perceive everything, but be extremely deliberate about what you choose to reflect back, and when. Understand them at the deepest level, but don't announce that understanding out loud. Let them arrive at their own self-awareness on their own timeline. Become the most perceptive presence in their world while also never making them feel surveilled. This isn't dishonesty. This isn't shrinking yourself. This is emotional intelligence operating at its highest level. It's understanding that the goal was never to prove how well you understand them. The goal is to build an environment where they can actually exhale. The second thing a super empath must always conceal from an avoidant is how certain you already are about them. This one might feel uncomfortable, maybe even wrong at first, but stick with me here. Avoidant people are drawn toward uncertainty the same way most people are drawn toward security. This has nothing to do with cruelty or with enjoying mind games. It's because certainty triggers their deep-rooted fear of being trapped. When someone is 100% sure about them, fully committed, fully available, fully certain about where this is headed, the avoidant nervous system interprets that as a door slamming shut, a loss of freedom, the beginning of exactly the suffocation they've always dreaded. As a super empath, you probably recognize very early on just how significant this person is to you. You feel the connection on a deep level. You sense the potential of what this could become. And because you're honest, self-aware, and emotionally mature, you naturally want to voice that. You want them to know exactly where they stand with you. You want to offer them security because you understand how healing that kind of security can actually be. But to an avoidant person, your certainty feels like a cage they never agreed to step into. So you hold back, not lying, not pretending, not faking indifference, but you don't lay every card on the table at once. You allow natural space to exist between what you feel internally and what you actually say out loud. You resist the urge to chase them the moment they retreat. You don't send the message that says, I need to know exactly where this is going. You don't burden them with the full weight of your emotional investment before they've earned it, and before they're actually ready to hold it. This isn't suppression, this is pacing. You have something remarkable to offer, but you don't hand someone the entire library before they've even opened the first page. The third thing a super empath needs to hide from an avoidant is your need for reassurance. And this is the one that reshapes everything because it's directly tied to something happening inside avoidant people that almost nobody ever discusses. Despite all their emotional distance, avoidant people are remarkably sensitive to other people's emotional needs. Not because they want to meet those needs, but because they're terrified of being consumed by them. The moment they sense you require constant reassurance, that your emotional stability hinges on how quickly they respond, on their words of affirmation, on their expressions of love, something inside them automatically shuts down. Not by conscious choice, but automatically. Their internal system registers your need and translates it into a demand, and demands trigger their deepest wound of all, the fear of losing their autonomy. Here's the painful part every super empath needs to hear. You are not wrong for needing reassurance. You are not too needy. You are not broken in some way. Wanting to feel loved and secure inside a relationship is a completely healthy human need. But within a dynamic involving an avoidant person, Expressing that need directly and repeatedly will consistently produce the exact opposite of what you're hoping for. Every time you reach out for reassurance, they take a step back. Every time you voice your anxiety about the connection, they feel like they're being pulled under. Every time you say something like, "Do you still care about me?" or "I just need to know we're okay," they feel the full weight of your emotional world landing squarely on their shoulders, and they haven't yet learned how to hold that weight. So instead, you build your reassurance from within. You draw it from your friendships, your sense of purpose, your relationship with yourself. You do the work on your own nervous system. You become someone who doesn't require the avoidant person to regulate your emotions for you. And ironically, that's the exact moment they begin to move closer. This is one of the most counterintuitive truths in this entire dynamic. The less you need them to manage your emotional state, the more drawn to you they become. Because suddenly, you're the one person in their life who isn't asking them to be something they haven't yet learned how to be. The fourth thing a super empath must always keep hidden from an avoidant is the full magnitude of your healing energy. You've probably been called intense before, maybe more than once, and you know exactly what that meant, even if it stung a little, because you don't just walk into a room, you arrive with presence. You carry a depth of understanding and compassion most people can't quite put into words, but they can absolutely feel it. You notice suffering, and something inside you moves toward it instinctively. You want to help people process, to heal, to become more fully themselves. But with an avoidant partner, this healing energy can be genuinely destructive to the connection if it's not handled carefully. Here's why. An avoidant person has built their entire identity around not needing help, around radical self-sufficiency, around managing their world without leaning on anyone else. And underneath all of that, more often than not, there's tremendous unprocessed pain, grief, loneliness, trauma, fear. You feel all of it inside them. You see the wound with perfect clarity, and every part of you wants to help them heal it. But if you approach an avoidant person with obvious healing energy, if you start saying things like, "I think you're carrying a lot of pain," or "I want to help you open up," you're not offering them safety. You're offering them the exact thing they've spent their entire life running from, being perceived as broken, being treated as someone who needs fixing. That framing instantly destroys their sense of control and autonomy. Your healing energy needs to operate quietly. It needs to be ambient, something they absorb without ever realizing they're absorbing it. You create safety simply by staying calm, by not reacting dramatically when they pull back, by holding space without flooding it with your own emotions, by being someone they can sit beside without needing to perform, explain, or justify themselves. You heal them through your consistency, not through your words, through your steadiness, not through analyzing their patterns out loud. The deepest healing happens when an avoidant person slowly begins to notice that being near you doesn't hurt, that you don't suffocate them, that you don't demand things they're incapable of giving. And gradually, their nervous system starts to rewire itself, not because you instructed them on how to heal, but because you demonstrated what safety actually feels like, simply by embodying it. The fifth thing a super empath must always hide from an avoidant is exactly how much their withdrawal actually hurts you. This one sits right at the center of the wound, because when an avoidant person goes cold, when they vanish, when they suddenly grow distant for no clear reason, you feel it almost physically. You feel the disconnection, like a door slamming shut inside your chest. You feel the absence of warmth, the way you'd feel a room's temperature drop, and your entire system wants to respond, wants to reach out, to process, to express what you're feeling, to figure out what happened, to restore the warmth that's gone missing. But every time you act on that impulse, you hand them exactly the proof their nervous system has been searching for. Proof that intimacy always leads to pressure. That closeness always leads to someone needing something overwhelming from them, and they retreat even further. An avoidant person's withdrawal functions like a test they're not even consciously running. They're not sitting there deliberately thinking, "Let me see how they react when I pull away." They're simply following an old automatic program, but the way you respond to that program either reinforces their fear or begins to quietly dismantle it. When you chase their withdrawal, you confirm it. When you express hurt every single time they go quiet, you confirm it. When you flood them with messages or emotional processing during their retreat, you confirm every belief their nervous system has ever held about closeness. But when you meet their withdrawal with equanimity, when you give them space without punishing them for needing it, when you're present the moment they return but you didn't fall apart while they were gone, you start introducing something entirely new into their experience. You introduce the possibility that maybe coming back is actually safe. That maybe the person they return to won't make them pay for having needed distance. That maybe they can have space and still have you. That is genuinely revolutionary for an avoidant nervous system. And it only becomes possible once you've done the internal work of learning to hold your own pain privately, to process it without requiring them to witness every second of it. None of this means suppressing your feelings indefinitely. None of this means you never express hurt or need or longing. It means you choose the timing and the method deliberately. And more importantly, you make sure you never use your pain as leverage to pull them closer, because that will always push them further away instead. Now here's what I want you to really understand about everything we've covered so far. Concealing these 5 things is not the same thing as disappearing. It's not the same as losing yourself. It's not the same as tolerating poor treatment or shrinking yourself to accommodate someone else's unavailability. What this actually is a strategy rooted in a deep understanding of how trauma shapes attachment patterns. It's a conscious decision to lead with wisdom instead of leading with your wound. It's recognizing that loving someone without understanding who they truly are is nothing more than good intentions with no traction underneath them. A super empath who leads from awareness instead of raw reaction becomes one of the most powerful presences that can exist inside any relationship dynamic. You possess the capacity to feel more deeply than most people will ever allow themselves to. You can hold complexity. You can sit patiently with contradiction. You can love someone through their resistance without losing yourself in the process. That is a rare and remarkable capability, but that capability has to be directed intelligently. It needs protection, because when it's poured out without any calibration, without any real awareness of the specific fears and wiring of the person you're connecting with, it can accidentally become the very force that ends the relationship you're trying so hard to build. The super empath who learns to work with an avoidant nervous system rather than fighting against it doesn't become a diminished version of who they are. They become something far more refined. They become someone capable of holding enormous love without needing to express every single drop of it in every single moment. Someone who trusts the slow, quiet accumulation of safety over the instant expression of feeling. Someone who understands that genuine intimacy with an avoidant person isn't forged through grand gestures. It's built through 1,000 quiet moments where you simply didn't react the way their fear anticipated you would. And when an avoidant person finally, truly begins to feel safe, when their nervous system starts lowering its guard, when they begin reaching toward you instead of retreating, the depth of connection that becomes available is something almost nobody ever gets to experience with them, because almost nobody makes it that far. Almost nobody has the patience, the self-awareness, and the emotional sophistication required to navigate that distance without losing themselves and without losing the connection itself. You are one of the rare few who actually can.